Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, June 17th, 2016. I am Dave Biddle, joined by the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Bax, there is a one-day camp again today, the third one-day camp for Ohio State this week, and this is going to be a big time when two huge 2017 prospects will be there, in addition to a bunch of 2018 prospects, 2019 prospects, but just focusing on the two major 2017 uncommitted prospects that will be there, Amir Riep and Jeffrey Okudah. Amir Riep, of course, four-star corner from Cincinnati Colerain. Okudah, number one safety in the country, number 5 overall player. He is from Grand Prairie, Texas. Normally a player with that type of rankings, I would say, and he's from Texas backs, I would say, probably a long shot for Ohio State. Not Okudah. I mean, Alex Gleitman has crystal balled him to Ohio State. Look at the crystal ball. A lot of people have crystal balled him to Ohio State. So let's start with Okudah. It's huge that he's coming to this camp. It's huge that some insiders feel like he's going to be a Buckeye. Just your thoughts on Jeffrey Okudah.
I think it's just a sign of how insane the recruiting is right now for Ohio State. I remember a few weeks ago we were looking at some of the remaining targets on the board for a very low number of available 2017 spots, and they were virtually all high 4-star and then 5-star kids. And that's what Jeffrey Okudah is right now. You're talking about the number 5 player in the country. He's a 5-star kid. He's followed in the footsteps of Tate Martell. He may be leading the path for Trevon Grimes and Tywan Lindsey. I mean, it's like, this is just insane. This is the only way to describe it. It's like a video game, and I'll be very honest. Everything you read about Okudah says that he's not interested really in staying in the state of Texas. This is where Ohio State can really make hay down there while the Longhorns are still down. When Texas isn't up, then that state is open for business for recruiting out of state. And you have to think Ohio State has a wonderful chance at landing him right now. And I think this is just an incredible opportunity for Ohio State to continue a 2017 class that, when it's all said and done, we're going to look at and say this may be the highest rated average stars we've ever seen go to an Ohio State recruiting class. And, Okudah is so highly touted. Martell, all these other guys are so highly touted that it makes us almost forget a kid like Amir Riep, who came out of nowhere about 6 months to a year ago. I mean, he was off most people's radar, and all of a sudden now he's one of the top kids in the state of Ohio. We continue to believe he's going to end up going to Ohio State, but, the more you get him on campus, the better. A lot of these kids who aren't the elite kids that the whole groundwork has been set for 2-3 years, sometimes you got to play a little catch up, and it seems like Ohio State has done that at this point. So those are the two big guns that are going to be here today. And let's face it, is anybody ever going to question Urban Meyer's coaching staff when it comes to recruiting? I mean, that's the bottom truth of it, is that those kids are more likely than not to end up in scarlet and gray, and that just tells you the way Ohio State's recruiting has gone the last year.
Yeah, looking at Amir Riep, both Alex and Bill Kurelic have crystal balled Riep to the Buckeyes. Bill Kurelic hasn't put a crystal ball in yet for Okudah, he tells me. But again, Alex has crystal balled Okudah to the Buckeyes. But both Bill and Alex have crystal balled Amir Riep to the Buckeyes, and obviously that's good news. Now, it's not a sure thing because just because he goes to Cincinnati Colerain and Kerry Combs is Mr. Colerain, I've heard that Amir Riep really likes Michigan State. But in the end, it sounds like he's going to pick Ohio State over Michigan State. And, I think Kerry Combs obviously is a huge factor there. Michigan State's showing him a lot of love, but again, Bax, I think Amir Riep will be a Buckeye. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even if it is a Cincinnati kid, I know most Buckeye fans here recruit from Cincinnati and go, oh, God, we're going to lose him to Notre Dame. But I don't think that's an instance like this. He's not going to, the Kerry Combs connection is a big deal there, obviously. But I think that you're eventually going to start landing these kids from Cincinnati with some consistency. He's not one of those kids who has that big Catholic Notre Dame connection that usually seems to prevent kids from going to OSU like the lineman that we lost from that part of the state last year. So I feel pretty good about Amir Riep. I don't want to take the top Ohio kids for granted because when you start doing that is when you start losing rivalry games. But I feel pretty good about him ending up in the class. If I had to guess between the two, if we only got one, it would be Riep just because of localness. But I honestly think we get both. I mean, my crystal ball doesn't count, but I think we get both.
Tyjon Lindsey, it seems like he is, his recruitment, I think a lot of people assumed, especially when Tate Martell committed to the Buckeyes, that Tyjon Lindsey would commit to the Buckeyes. Seems like Ohio State's been his favorite for a long time, but Nebraska's in the mix. Other schools are in the mix, and you have Zach Smith on Twitter, seemingly taking some shots at Keith Williams, the wide receiver coach from Nebraska. What's your thoughts on the whole, I'm assuming it's stemming from the whole Tyjon Lindsey recruitment. What's your take on Tyjon Lindsey recruitment and Zach Smith's capers on Twitter?
There's a happy part and a sad part here. And the happy part is I think the Buckeyes is a fantastic shot on landing Tyjon Lindsey. I think it's also, I don't want to say a position of need, but if you look at a lot of the receivers they've brought in recent years, they're not those squirrely SWAT guys who can, get open loose and, jitterbug their way around. The Buckeyes have lost a lot of those guys. I mean, Braxton's gone. You're going to have Dontre Wilson gone after this year. Curtis Samuel's an upperclassman. It's an important spot to fill. Now that's the positive. The downside is that I don't know what in the world Zach Smith is doing. Like, at this point, I just want to tell him to grow up. I know that he's the youngest coach, so he's trying to use Twitter and be like all the cool kids that are getting recruited, but there is no reason to take a shot at Nebraska. Ohio State this would be like the United States constantly complaining about something that Chile does. They're not really on the same level, I mean, like, what in the world is Zach Smith doing? There is no point in taking on another coaching staff that you're barely competing head-to-head with on recruits, that isn't in the same stratosphere in terms of success on the field. And Nebraska, to the modern kid, to the modern recruit, is like a program that happens to be located in the middle of nowhere that has a lot of really nice fans that doesn't win more than 9 games a year. Those of us who grew up on Nebraska as championship caliber Nebraska, I'm sorry, but most of the kids getting recruited these days might not have even been born yet. In fact, the last time that they even went to a title game, the ones that are getting recruited today weren't born yet the last time Nebraska won a national title. Why is Ohio State lowering themselves to the level of Nebraska in terms of the eyes of these recruits when they should be above it? Zach does not need to do this stuff. This is just it's a cycle and it's a pattern. And I hate to say it, but it's a precedent that's been established with him. Remember when James Quick committed to Louisville over Ohio State? There was that big Twitter rant. It's like every time somebody does something, Zach Smith has to get on Twitter and lose his mind. Stop doing this stuff. I know it has to drive Urban nuts. This is thoroughly unnecessary. And by the way, this wasn't even a response to some snarky Twitter post where he was defending himself. Like, the one time people started talking trash on him from Michigan where they're like, look, you can have Jed Fish you can have Zach Smith. Well, Jed Fish's resume is the guy that gets fired all the time because he's not a good coach. Okay, you can respond to that. But this was out of the blue, and it just was thoroughly unnecessary to attack Nebraska this way. It's a dumb thing to do, and I don't know why he did it.
Before I let you go, I was asked this question in my chat yesterday. How many more years will Urban coach at Ohio State? What's your take on that?
That's what everybody wants to know because they know as long as Urban's here, Ohio State's going to be golden when it comes to winning 11, 12 games a year. I mean, right. Here's the way I look at this. Urban is not an old guy. Let's keep that in mind first. It's not like Urban's 65 or something. I know he's been ubiquitous in college football for the last 15 years because he was a head coach at such a young age. I believe Urban was only like 40 when he took his head coaching job at Bowling Green. So, this is a guy who's in his mid-50s, that's all. So he's got a little bit of time left. But let's be very honest here. He's already retired once from burnout. I know he's happier in Columbus. We haven't talked about whether Urban's pushing himself too hard in a long time, which is nice. And I know this is much more of where he's wanted to be all along. But let's face it, he would be an in-demand TV broadcaster the second he retired. His son is in high school now, and I know he was going to coach at least through Nate graduating. But beyond that, I'm not so sure. I think it's going to be a year by year, how much longer he wants to do it kind of deal. I think Urban Meyer is a guy who overall the Buckeyes will probably get about 10 years out of, which puts us about halfway through. Now, I could be wrong. You never know. I mean, Urban could decide to stay and keep winning if we're winning national titles every other year, Urban's probably going to be here for a while. I know in the back of his mind he'd love to beat Saban on that count. Then he's got a little ways to work on it. But I think realistically speaking, you can expect about 10 years total for Urban Meyer, and we're about halfway through that. And then after that, you say thank you for saving us and giving us another golden decade. Let's hope we can find a guy like Tom Herman or something.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've always said I thought Urban would coach a total of 8 years at Ohio State. Now that we're halfway through that, I'm hoping it's more like 10. So I'll go with 10 total, 6 more, including this one. But yeah, I think I'll be right around there, a total of 8 to 10 years at Ohio State. And we're going to look back on this at the golden age of Ohio State football when you talk about going from Jim Tressel right to Urban Meyer with that Luke Fickell year mixed in. But 2 legendary coaches pretty much back-to-back when you talk about Tressel and then Meyer. And you usually don't see that. Usually if there's a legendary coach, there's a drop-off for a while until another big-time coach comes around, no matter what program you're talking about. But
look at some of these other coaches who come in and are followed by a quote-unquote very successful coach. They don't usually live up to the same standard that the initial coach did. I mean, even OSU, look, Woody Hayes was a legend, right? The coaches that followed him were very good. Earl was very good. Coop was very good. But did they win national titles? No. Tressel was 30-something years later that, we were between national titles when Tress came in. I mean, it took 25 years from Woody leaving to Tress coming back. So being blessed like we are with Tressel essentially straight to Urban is a rarity. Look at that school at North. Bo Schembechler was a legend who didn't win a national championship and barely could win Rose Bowls, but I digress. He was followed by Gary Mueller, who struggled, by Lloyd Carr, who did win sort of part of a national title, and then fell off the cliff, and they haven't really gotten back up anywhere near the mountaintop since then. We're really lucky at Ohio State. We're incredibly lucky. All these major programs have had down cycles. Look at USC, a program that should dominate the western half of the U.S. in recruiting every year. And they still haven't gotten themselves back to where they need to be. They've had drunken coaches. They've had Lane Kiffin. They've had all kinds of issues. Texas should be the most easy to recruit at and win at program in the country. Not so much the last 6-7 years. Florida has down times after Urban left. And Florida was down before Urban got there. All these major programs. Alabama stunk before Saban. Ohio State is so lucky because it's not just about the program. It's about the coach. You have to have the elite coach and you have to have the blue blood program to really have a chance at a dynasty, a chance at being consistently elite. And we're so lucky that we have these two the way that we're going to have them. 20 out of 21 years theoretically of Urban and Tressel. God, that's incredibly blessed.
Doesn't get much better than that. Doesn't get much better than the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Thank you for your wisdom backs. And quick programming note, we will have an open thread on the front row message board today talking about Ohio State's one-day camp. Again, Amir Riep will be there. Jeffrey Okudah will be there. Many other top prospects will be there. Those are the 2 big guns, as we mentioned, from the 2017 class. But there's going to be a bunch of 2018 kids and 2019 kids there as well. So make sure you check out our open thread on the front row message board. Thanks again to Matt Baxendell, and thanks to the listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate it. Hope everyone has a great day and a great weekend. Let's hear some Buckeye swag, best in band in the land.